Wow, we sound awesome.
The bite-sized pieces.
We sound awesome. Hello. Gee, that was nice. I just want to sort of sit and just enjoy that for a moment. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this amazing event. I kind of want to start by just saying that you're all really lucky to be involved in a day like today, especially given that there's, I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way, but there's a small enough group here that there's a good chance that you can kind of get to know everybody, both the people, like us and the panelists that'll be up here a bit later, but also each other. Like, this is a really valuable opportunity. Often you come to a session or a workshop kind of thing like this and it's hundreds of people. It can feel quite overwhelming. This is quite a really great opportunity to meet some people today, so I hope you get a lot out of it. Before we hear from George Maple, which is why we're here, I just wanted to say, it's a privilege to be on Gunai country. I love this part of Victoria. It's a beautiful part of the state. I grew up in a little town called Whittlesea, which is just north of Melbourne. It's a little country town. But my parents moved down to a town called Seaspray, which is past Sale and the 90 Mile Beach. So I come down this way a bunch of times every year. I lived in Lakes Entrance briefly when my partner was working down there. My in-laws used to live in Flaggy Creek, which is out the back of Bairnsdale. Yeah, I really love it down here, so it's really nice to be asked to come down. Is this your first time in this part of Victoria, George? And may I call you George?
Yeah, of course. Okay, I think it's kind of interchangeable these days, and it does get confusing. I know sometimes when I email people, and they're like, "Who's Jess? Is that your assistant?" I'm like, no, just keep it simple. So George is good.
We'll go with George. Okay.
Yeah, and this is my first time in regional Victoria, although I feel like a lot of the early touring, you're kind of like in and out of vans and things, and it looks familiar, but I'm not 100% sure if I've been here or not.
Yeah, we were just backstage where we were looking at the posters of some of the other greats who have come through here, like John Williamson and Denise Drysdale and an Elvis impersonator, and it's just...
I thought it was actually Elvis.
It's beautiful.
I got really excited.
George did look at the poster and go, Elvis played the West Gippsland Art Centre in Warragul? Anyway, I'm going to be looking at my phone a bit. I really apologise. I'm not checking my texts. It's just where my notes are. But George, okay, so you've had an amazing kind of 10 years-ish. But if we can go right back to the start, origin story vibes, baby George at home with the family. What's your baby George? Okay. Earliest memories of listening to music? Like, what music was in the house? What were your parents into?
Yeah.
Take us all the way back, because everyone starts somewhere.
Yes, okay, so do you want me to look at you guys, or would you like, you want eye contact? Does that make you feel awkward?
Direct eye contact with every individual to creep them out.
I always feel uncomfortable when performers look at me straight in the eye. I'm like, stop. I grew up in a little beach town called Newport in New South Wales, so it's still in Sydney, but anyone who lives in Sydney doesn't consider it Sydney, which is very funny. Like, anyone who lives in the city says, I'm just coming out of Sydney, but it is in Sydney. And I grew up with, my cousin actually lived with me when I was really young, and she was an incredible playwright from a very, I think she was 7 or 9, and so we used to write plays and perform them at the park, and we'd charge everyone to come and watch us. Had a little coin jar thingy. Yeah. And anyway, she was super talented at writing plays, and I think when you're a younger sort of sibling, you always want to kind of differentiate yourself, and so I realised that I could sing quite early, and that became my thing and my sort of contribution to this sort of creative, I guess, whirlpool that we had as young children. And I think the music that was in our house, I think there was a lot of Sade, there was a lot of Michael Jackson, there was a lot of, I don't know if it was a little bit later, but there was that, do you remember Eva Cassidy? And she did those incredible covers. That was quite poignant. Katie Lang was another one. They're probably very smooth sounds, which checks out.
Is that from your parents? Is that your mum and dad's kind of taste?
Yeah,
definitely. Did either of them make music or play music in the house or anything like that?
No. My parents are very sort of scientific and business orientated.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I kind of felt, it's funny, I only ever really found my place as, I guess, my proper place as an artist when I moved to LA I was there on and off for like 7 years, but the last 4 years before the pandemic, that's where I realised that it was kind of like being a Smurf your whole life, and then you find all the other Smurfs, and you realise that you kind of felt a little bit out of place most of your sort of younger life. But yeah, I come from a very, very like normal family, so.
As most people do, it turns out.
Yeah.
So in terms of, before we get to LA, so in terms of maybe, was it in your teenage years that you first have a go at writing a song? Because it's one thing to be singing and to be like known in your family as the kid that's got a great voice and can sing, but at what point was there a moment you remember when you were like, oh, I could maybe write my own song about something? And do you remember what your earliest songs were actually about?
I actually do. I wrote a song that was basically a direct rip-off of, what was that song, Alicia Keys, the big one?
Fallen?
Yes, that was the one. When I listened to, I can still hear the melody in my head, but it was basically Falling. And it was about, I think it was about a boy that I had a crush on, I'm pretty sure. I was very young though, so it's a little bit concerning. I was about 9, so.
It's okay. My 6-year-old sang me a song last night that she had written that's about how you are so handsome, you are the one, I love you so much. For a minute I was like, she's singing this about me, and I was like, no, she's singing about a boy. So 9 is like...
Or a teacher, which would be weirder.
Okay, I know what I'm going to be thinking about the whole drive.
Sorry. Oh, I didn't mean it like that.
Amazing.
I meant that very innocently.
No. Okay, so tell us more about this song. So did you show it to anybody? Or?
I sang it to my friends at school, I'm pretty sure. Oh, maybe that was in, I can't remember if that was in primary school, but then I entered a song competition. I wonder if it was an APRA one. I don't know. I was very young, and I sang a song that was about healing the world. I wrote this song, but the thing is, I kind of like left it until 2 days before, and I wrote the song, and it was all A minor because that was my favorite key, and then I won. And I remember my mum. Obviously, you think your kids are really good at stuff, and you get really proud of them, but she sort of wasn't quite sure in the context of things being very good, whether I did actually have like, you know, an okay level of talent. So when I won that, she was like, oh, maybe this is what she needs to do, and became very supportive after that, which was really great. But yeah, entered the song. I can't remember what that song was about, but it was definitely about healing the world, which is quite nice, you know. I was about 11.
We should heal the world.
We should, 100%.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for writing that song.
No worries.
How did it go? The world was all right after that? It was all fixed? Yeah.
I think temporarily, very temporarily, and I'd like to think that like maybe I should have stayed on that path instead of going down these like, you know, other places that I went to.
So just trying to like join the dots before we get in, because I'm keen to talk some of the nuts and bolts, because you've done so much writing in the last 10 years, and we're sort of here to learn that. But just trying to get the context of how you got there, how you got to LA, how you got to working with some of these other people. So, okay, so you've won this competition. You now sort of have a bit more confidence that maybe writing music is not just something that you love doing for yourself, but maybe it's something that other people might enjoy as well. So what are the steps that you take then, maybe as a teenager or as a young adult? Like, how are you putting yourself out there, or how are you trying to connect your songs you're writing with an audience? What was the first couple of things you did there?
When I was super young, I think the first step was refining my vocal abilities. So I had a singing teacher. I had quite a few different singing teachers, which was really important because I did everything from opera to choirs to jazz to and it was really about just building as much experience as possible. And then when I was 15, I actually got offered my first record deal, and that was in the phase of, remember the Vanessa Carlton? Yeah, so I could play that.
What a song.
It was the one song that I could play on the piano.
Amazing.
And so I got offered this deal, and my parents, being, you know, smart people, they freaked out because they're like, she's still in school, she's so young, just doesn't feel right. So they took me to see this. My mum read a book by Shane Simpson, who's a music lawyer, and it was called The Music Business. And so she educated herself on the whole music business. And then she actually she booked an appointment with Shane to sit down and say, like, because I was going, I'm going to quit school, I'm just going to go and be a pop star, that's what I'm going to do. And Shane, who is still my lawyer to this day, or Jules is my lawyer, but they sat down and they said, look, finish school, learn how to produce, own as much of your songwriting as possible, keep performing as much, and just like build your skills as much as you can, and then maybe even go to university. And then if you still want to do this, then you can go for it. So I actually did that. That's exactly what I did. And during that sort of 7-year period, I did a lot of singing in restaurants and kept sort of songwriting and going in competitions, and I just kept doing things, basically. I think I wrote a little EP with someone, and then when it came to, I went to uni. I actually studied law for about 6 months, and then I didn't like it. And then I went to, I met Hugo from Flight Facilities, really fortuitously at Hugo's in Sydney. And my friend said, you know, my friend's a great vocalist, and I sent him this like CD that I had, and it was me singing, I think it was a song for you, I think it was, I don't know. And then he said, oh, we should write a song together. And I went, okay, cool. They've got this band called Flight Facilities, and they've got this song called Crave You. It's just when Crave You was just starting. And so we wrote, I remember I was in my little apartment in Mossman, and I still write demos into my laptop, like no USB mic, no nothing. It's quite embarrassing. Some things on my record are actually from my laptop, just because you're there and you're singing and it's just there. And so I wrote this idea, and then we refined it. I didn't know how to use WeTransfer or something at the time, and so I actually sent a USB in the mail to, that's real, it actually happened, to Hugo and Jimmy. And then the song came out on the radio, everything started to happen, and I saw it as like, I was like, okay, I think this is that moment that that Shane said to me 7 years ago, said, when you have that opportunity, take it. And then I had this opportunity to tour around the world and sing one song, and so I did that for about a year. And then, oh, that's right, and then I wanted to be at this stage, I kind of still just wanted to be a songwriter, actually. I'd sort of transitioned from wanting to be the pop star to just wanting to be the songwriter. And so I started doing pitches for like big songs. You know, you used to have these pitches that would come through from like David Guetta and places like that.
So is this you living in LA at this
No,
point?
no, this is me living out of a suitcase, which was like for 7 years. So we're just at the Flight Facilities.
Yeah, so we're starting.
Moment. Foreign Language was the song, and it's featuring Jess, because I didn't know what I wanted to be as an artist at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if we pause here for a second, I'm just thinking, like, just as an aside, having someone well established in the music industry like Shane Simpson, or someone at a major label, or you know, it could be a Triple J presenter, or having someone like that come to you as a teenager, and this happens all across the country, different people, maybe people in this room, I got no idea. Having someone like that come to you and go, you're amazing, I want to help you do a thing. A, that's something that every like songwriter and artist dreams of happening to them, and it you know, it doesn't happen for everybody. But B, it's such a wise thing for them to say, hey, you seem really talented, I can see a really great future for you, but maybe the best thing you can do for yourself and for us as people who want to work with you is actually learn a bit about yourself, come into yourself a little bit, get some life experience, develop your skills. It's really reassuring to hear that, because you do hear these horror stories which are the opposite, which are more exploitative or more like, oh wow, a teenager's uploaded something to Unearthed and it's going viral, let's just jump on it right now and squeeze what we can get out of it. It's really reassuring to hear stories. It's like there are people giving good advice to young people in the music industry. But it's interesting, so you tell me more about the fact that you, by this point, have decided you actually want to be a writer rather than an artist. Is that because your experience with Flight Facilities has kind of given you this insight into what it's like to be behind the scenes, or is it just you thinking, oh, that's my strength is actually to write melodies for other people, or did you want to be a chameleon that was writing across different styles? Or?
Yeah, I think, and it's still to this day, the essence, because for me, all the external, all the performing, the pop star things, the awards, all of that stuff is that's something I've had to learn over the years. But my essence is always the creative process and that feeling that you get, and you guys would all know that as writers, the feeling that you have when something kind of downloads and you experience. I was talking to my friend, I think it's like the closest thing to truth that we can experience as humans. And I think that feeling for me of pure creation was the only thing, and it still is the essence of what I really, really, really care about. And so for me, being a songwriter felt more in alignment with what I wanted to do. But the realities of going into the industry as a songwriter only at that point of my life, it was like I was having to fit into a mold and write to a brief, and that once again didn't really feel in alignment with that essence of creation energy that like I really, really strive to experience over and over again as a writer. And so what I realized was, okay, well, maybe my best option is actually to build an artist project where I can create what I want to create, and then from there, the right people will want me to come into the room as an original writer rather than a kind of blank slate that can fit into the brief that they want to build. Because it didn't really make sense to me, because I was like, artistry is meant to be this unique imprint that we all have, and it felt counterintuitive to be going and working to a brief. It felt like being a bit of an employee rather than being an artist and like a creator. And I think I didn't really understand what artistry was until that moment where I was like, no, I think this is what I need to do. And then I know that the right songs will find their way into other artists' repertoire, and that's what's happened since. And I've been given this really incredible experience of learning about being the artist, which has been challenging, but it's been incredible, and I'm really grateful for it. But yeah, songwriting is always where it's at.
I think, it's good to acknowledge that there's like a place in the capital I music industry. Like there's definitely a place for writers who maybe aren't artists and who are chameleons, and they move across different styles, and they're known more for, I guess, their functional output. That those writers exist, and they're really valuable, and they're just as valuable as more artistic writers. But what you're talking about, to me, it sounds more like understanding what it is that you want to do as a person and what your strengths are.
Yeah.
And there's also, as you say, you might want to write for other people, or you might want to collaborate with other people, but it's different going into that situation, knowing what you're about, and also having that other person want the thing that you're about to be the thing that comes into that room, and that they then welcome into their world.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a similar experience with my work in video game music, where in video game music there are a lot of video game composers who can work as chameleons. They can work in lots of different styles. They can do orchestral pieces. They can do 8-bit synth-wavy kind of pieces, and they just move to whatever the project needs. But then thinking that I wanted to get into game music and realizing, well, I'm not like that. When I make music, I just do my thing, which is a very specific thing. And then getting to a point where maybe I can't work on 100 games, but maybe I can work on 2 or 3 games where the exact thing that they need is the exact thing that I do. And kind of owning that, rather than maybe floundering around in a place that isn't true to who you are or what you can do, what your strengths are. I think that's really powerful to have that realization pretty early, as it sounds like you did, George.
Yeah, but I think I was thinking about what you said just before around when there are writers who can be chameleons from the get-go. And I really think consistently, whether it is being an artist or being a writer, it's about that understanding and self-exploration that is required before. So if you know that you are a writer that is a chameleon, that is meant for these different spaces, and you know your artist voice, then you can bring that to the table from a really early stage. Whereas if you have to, like I had to go through the artist process to actually be like, okay, this is my voice. So I think people get there in different ways. And you're totally right. That's the number one thing, is that finding your unique essence and then bringing that into the space that you want to create in, whether that's writing or artistry.
I also want to say, hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some questions. So if anybody's sort of sitting on one, percolating a little something in your mind that you want to ask George specifically, whether it's about the craft of writing or something to do with her journey, just hold on to that, keep it in your mind, and hopefully we'll find some time for that towards the end. Well, if we'll go sideways a little bit here and maybe get into some of the most interesting part of music, which is rights and royalties and splits and all of that kind of stuff, which Bless you, APRA, AMCOS. We love you for explaining this stuff to us and administrating it for. I've also wanted to thank APRA for the $12.07 that I got a few weeks ago. Love it. Helped me get, 2 lattes? No, honestly though, APRA does such an amazing job. And I wanted to ask you, George, like part of if you decide to be a professional writer or artist, you do need to learn a lot of kind of arcane, often outdated, often confusing stuff about rights. What are your rights? What are the rights in the song? How does it get split? How did you go about learning about that? You said your mum picked up a music business book and educated herself, which is really good.
She was great.
How did you learn that stuff, and how confident, even now, how confident do you feel about that stuff? How do you navigate it?
I very much was flying. I feel like my whole career I've just flown very blind a lot of the time and figured it out as I go. I feel quite confident now understanding the various components of whether it's publishing, master side, neighbor. I'm still not quite sure about neighboring rights. That's one thing that I'm like, I have a neighboring rights deal, but I don't really know what it does. But I think publishing...
That's for if your music gets placed in Neighbours, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
is that right,
that's
Abra?
exactly what it is, yeah. I'll go with that. So, no, I think, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask for this because there's been no real structural journey behind it. But I think I do have a pretty good understanding of everything now. And one thing that I think I learnt pretty quickly was really understanding your, and it's such a difficult conversation in collaborative spaces, but really understanding your percentage value of a song and how you carve that up, because I got caught pretty early with that. I remember this song that I wrote and I still look at it now, I'm like, how did I take 5% on that? That was silly, you know, because I just didn't know. And I felt bad. I was using my emotional experience to say, oh, I felt bad because I let that person down because I wasn't able to do something. So I'll reduce my splits. Just so you know, you don't reduce splits because you let someone down. It's like the work that you've done is the work that you've done. But I think also understanding that every collaborative space, that split will be a conversation, and sometimes those conversations are really difficult to have, particularly when you're having them directly. So I think it's one of the skills that I'm probably most proud of, is being able to have conversations quite elegantly with people around really difficult things like splits, because it's really like money and all those, it comes down to that. You know, people find that an uncomfortable subject. But there is a way to really look at things and say, okay, so this is how much I contributed lyrically. This is how much I contribute to the final arrangement of the song. And it's unfortunately one of those things, doesn't matter how, you can sit there for 3 weeks and then what you actually created doesn't make it onto the song. And that means that you don't actually have the rights to that much of the song, if that makes sense. So really getting your head around what that means. And I've actually never really delved into the legal copyright side of it, but I have a good understanding based on going, this is 100% of the song, these are the people, these are the skill sets, it's the lyric, melody, and instrumentation, and then carving it out accordingly and being really strong with that as well. I've had a few situations where I've had to be like, sorry, just because there's 4 people in the room does not mean it's split 4 ways. That's not how it works.
And it's funny because in some scenes and in some styles of music, like that's the Nashville rule, isn't it? I think.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
I might be getting that wrong, but you know, there are scenes or circles where that is very much the rule. It's kind of everyone comes into a room knowing that even if they sit up the back, then all they do is go, oh, I love that. You know, that they're still going to get an equal split on it. But I think what's most important is to know that things can be split anyway.
Exactly.
And it's all about clarity and communication.
Relationships. And honouring one another as writers as well, and respecting each other's contribution and coming at it from that place, I think is a lesson I've learned a little bit later. Rather than coming from this space of like scarcity, it's coming from this space of abundance. Like we're all here to create incredible work, and we're all in this together, and we honour one another's contributions. And something like the Nashville split, I mean, I've had that with co-writers that I work with like regularly, and we all agree that no matter what we do, it's 50-50, because it all works out and it all kind of like makes sense. But once again, it just comes down to relationships and like individual conversations, I think.
I'm Googling it to make sure I've got it right, because this is being filmed. I don't want to be Actually, oh yeah, like Nashville house split, I think is maybe. Oh no, that's something to do with the election. Look, I probably just made up. I probably just totally made a thing up, but it's a thing. I remember. I've forgotten her name now. Amazing Australian Nashville-based songwriter who I remember seeing on a panel not dissimilar to this, talking about her experiences in Nashville and about that.
Oh, interesting.
That split. I love digging in on this topic because it's so nerdy. Because you mentioned you've developed some methods and some tools for clear communication that work well for you. Does that involve, say you're going into a room with a brand new collaborator, maybe you've been emailing or something, or some third party set it up. You're like, so you're gonna have a session with this person and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Are you, when you meet with them, is the first thing you say to them like, hey, I'm George, just so you know, this one's going to be 50-50, or just so you know, like, do you have that conversation before you start working?
No.
Or are you, because I know that some artists do, whereas some artists are very much like, no, we've got to actually just be humans, creators first, and then have the awkward conversation. Yeah,
because I honestly think that it's not awkward if you're coming at it from a place of love. Like, honestly, that's what it is. It's like, we're all here to create something incredible, and we'll figure it out, and we'll honor one another. And also really understanding that these kinds of things can be really triggering for people. So when you're in that space, kind of being attuned to your collaborators and attuned to the people that you are working with, and thinking, okay, putting yourself in their shoes as well. Yep. It's really, honestly, once again, it comes down to really that self-awareness and that knowing yourself first, so that you are coming at it from a place where you're not coming at it from a triggered place. And so therefore you can hold space for others who may end up that way, or people, sitting behind managers and it gets awkward. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I think it's just like taking a breath and being able to be like, okay, how am I going to navigate this? And staying in your truth, I think that's all you can really do. And there will be awkward conversations and it won't feel good sometimes, but you will get there, I think. And it's practice as well.
These were mentioned before, and you've mentioned some of them as well, but you've worked with artists including DJ Snake, Flume, TK, Snake Hips, Guy Sebastian, Jess Malboy, Hayden James, Flight Facilities, as you mentioned, and a lot of other artists who maybe aren't at the same level of names, or just other writers. So as someone with a lot of experience in collaboration, and we're here with some writers who I'm sure have maybe tried collaborating or want to collaborate with other people, whether it's just locally or a friend or someone you admire. If you find someone you want to work with, say you just find someone on Instagram or TikTok or whatever that you just go, I think I'm going to get along with this person. Yeah. How do you hit them up? How do you do you have? Is there someone on your team that hits, or do you
My
DM?
Team.
Or, well, this is the thing. We'll get to your team in a bit because that's really interesting. But like, let's just say, because I know from my experience, I'm just DMing people pretty willy nilly a lot of the time. Like, hey man, like you're awesome. What? Yeah. Can we have a coffee or something? Where does it start? And then I wanted to ask you, like, when you do get together for a session, maybe with someone new. I've got a mate who does a lot of writing sessions, and he'll often they'll go out for a coffee, which turns into a lunch, and they're talking about their lives and their parents and their childhoods. And then they have to book a second session because they haven't actually gotten to the studio, because all they've done is just get to know each other as human beings. Yeah. And he's all about that. He's kind of like, we can't write a song together until we're sort of friends, at least on some level. So what's your experience of that?
Oh my gosh, there've been so many different experiences. It's so varied, I think. That's another thing with songwriting, is that it's just so unique to that moment. It's such a moment-to-moment thing. And I guess I'm quite fluid in that I just like to be exposed to whatever it is. I kind of figure it out when I'm there. But it's been really varied, but I think we were talking about this on the Zoom the other day. I didn't really plan much of it. It did just actually happen. But I think once again, it was because it came from this place of joy. That was like, I just want to write something. Let's just get in the studio. That will be fun. And I think when it comes from that place, it always tends to work out. And I completely agree with sitting with someone for 5 hours and talking about your childhood traumas, and then the song will happen in 20 minutes at the end. That's what from experience, that happens a lot. That connection and that space that you're sharing is so crucial to actual creativity. Because I've been into sessions where, you know, particularly pop writing sessions and things where it's like, we're going to write a song like this, we're going to do that. It never works. It never works. It's always the ones where you sit there and you connect and you find the shared space, and then it becomes a co-creative experience. And that is based on, once again, being attuned to the people around you, like really wanting to get to know them, really wanting to understand them and to hold space for what they have to bring to the table, particularly if you're working with an artist rather than another co-writer. That's what I feel like my number one job is if I'm collaborating with another artist like Jess or something like that. It's about me actually being able to like almost take the lens off my own experience, sit into her experience, and then find the space that we share, and then that's where we write from. And it's quite magical, really, but it's, I think once again, it keeps coming down to that psychological awareness, inner awareness. Those things are so crucial, particularly when it comes to collaboration. And then in terms of writing with people and how that's happened, DMs and stuff, I don't know if I've ever done that, because I think
You're too cool for that.
No, it's not that. No.
Hey, man.
I honestly think just because so much of it was just when you're on the road and you meet someone and then you're doing something and then you're in a studio, and I was just in the studio so often that it really did just happen.
Yeah.
But like allowing it to just happen, you know?
Let's just pivot again. What's your, like, maybe right now and compared to in the past, do you have a disciplined writing process? Do you have, like, for example, do you have a journal that you write in the morning? Do you have a regular session every day or every week set aside, like, this is when I must sit and write? Do you have your own, like, I must write 3 songs a week, or I must, anything like that? Do you do anything like that, or are you more just kind of like, it happens when it happens?
I'm kind of free form. I'll find, I figured something out the other day that I have these, I think as artists and writers, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I think we signed up for quite an intense emotional experience. And I think that we were given this intense emotional experience, and then we're given a little gift that enables us to kind of put the overflow somewhere. And I've always noticed that when I go through these, whether it's like a breakup or whether it's like something really intense emotionally that I experience, I can never write from that particular space. It's too much. But I always find like 4 days after, all of a sudden I'm like, and like, you know, the other night I wrote like 4 songs in a night so quickly and so easily. And I think over the years, when I was younger, I actually did have quite a disciplined technique, because I was trying to learn how to produce. So I would sit there when I was on tour, and every morning I would get up and I would try and figure out how to use Ableton a little bit. I think I was on Logic then, but how to use Ableton a little bit better, or you know, go through sounds or listen to things. It was very much like school. But I think as I've become a little bit more more better at the things, now it's very much allowing it to flow with life as well. And then if something evolves, like I've got a record that's sort of coming together, but I don't know where that will end up. And then there'll be sessions that will come up for other artists, like the Jess stuff, and then I just kind of go with it, to be honest. But discipline is good, particularly singing practice, very important. I broke my voice last year by accident. It really hurts. I do your warm-ups. That's what I would say.
You broke your voice?
Yeah.
Was it during a gig or?
Yeah, I went 0 to 100. I've always been a little bit lazy with my own singing practice, because when you have like a natural level of ability, it's just not that fun. I like to be free and expressive, and I have to do scales, and I don't really like it that much. And I had this gig, at the Enmore, and it was really cold, and I decided that I hadn't really practiced in about a month, and I just went 0 to 100, and I felt something a little bit funny, and then I went into the cold, and I had something stressful emotionally happen, and then I just lost like 3 notes in my range just before the gig, and I had to like work around that, and luckily the adrenaline pushed me through. But then afterwards, I couldn't speak for 2 weeks, and then it took me 3 months to fully recover and be able to even do like a proper scale. And since then, I've made sure that if I have a gig, like discipline. I have like the vocal warm-ups on the internet, which are, daily vocal exercises for an awesome voice. That's what I do. Yeah, but discipline is important, definitely.
Yeah, and if part of your writing process is using your voice to explore,
scary
or to
to not have
melody,
it.
If you don't have it, you're kind of missing a tool.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about also learning about production software, learning your way around Logic, Ableton. You say like a lot of your demos, and then even some of the stuff that ends up on your record is things that you're recording straight into your own laptop.
Yes.
I think that's really common now. I think it's really common that writers, even people who would just consider themselves strictly writers, I think in order to facilitate your writing and also in order to collaborate, having some basic skills with that software is super, super helpful.
100%. Just the navigational tools to be able to click record and just put it down so you have it in your demos, basically.
Yeah,
and
getting to a point where using the software, it's not intimidating, it's not confusing, and you kind of become fluent with it. And it doesn't mean you have to be Skrillex.
No.
It just means, like knowing some of the basics. And luckily there are lots of great online tutorials and YouTube videos and stuff to bring yourself up to speed on a lot of that. But in terms of production or songwriting, I guess, like, have you had key people along the way who have kind of sat you down and said like, all right, this is how you do this is how you do that? Like any kind of creative songwriting or production mentors who've sort of guided you a bit along the way?
Not really. That's why this is like really important. I think I feel very lucky to be here because I didn't have any of that. I was just flying blind and figuring it out. And I did spend a lot of time in studios, so I was around producers a lot, and I'd pick up a lot of things. And I think that helped from a production point of view. I did have one songwriter who was incredible. He just gave me this really, really poignant piece of advice, and his name's Alexander Burnett. He's an incredible songwriter. And he said to me, "What are you trying to say?" And it was so simple, but it has stuck in my brain forever. And it's the thing that
Were you working on a song together at the time?
Yeah. So I used to be a little bit more metaphysical with the way that I would lyrically speak.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just get to the point. And I think that was because I was afraid to reveal that part of myself, once again, inner journey stuff. And he just said, like, what are you trying to say? And it's so relevant it doesn't matter what artistic form you're working in, it's so important to continue to come back to that. Like, what am I trying to say? Why am I doing it? What am I trying to say? And, but that was probably the closest to like mentor advice that I ever received.
Yeah, and if that's like, what a great question to be able to return to
it's
over
incredible.
and over and over again when you're working, because it's a question that's not just helpful if you are trying to write a song. Say, for example, you're like, I want to write a song that reaches a lot of people, or I want to write a song that can get placed in a film, or I want to write a song that does this or that. It's important to go, what am I trying to say? What is this song trying to do? But even if you're writing purely for your own personal growth, because you want to express something about yourself, or you want to explore yourself, or you want to learn a new skill, still then being able to write something and then be able to take that step back and go, what am I trying to say? So do you find yourself asking that now a lot when you're writing music?
No, I would like to say that I have quantum leaped to a new place.
That's good.
Yeah, no, it actually is a really liberating thing to finally get to a place as a writer where I write most things in one take, so I don't even come back, and the only thing I'll do is fill in lyrics, but essentially I'll go in, I'm in the zone, I channel, I write the main melody and the main sort of accompaniment, and it doesn't really change beyond then, and then the production evolves, and then the lyrics evolve, but they've already, the essence is already there, the idea is already there, and that's something that like I'm really happy that I have come to a place now where it's so effortless, and I'm very grateful for that. But
it's a valuable skill.
Long time coming.
Well, and that's the thing, you call it effortless, but you think about the effort that you must have put in. People talk about the 10,000 hours a lot. Could you approximate how many thousands of hours you've been writing, singing, listening to music, learning, collaborating to finally get to the point where you can confidently go, I'm going to write a song, and then it just comes out, and you're like, that was it. I did it. I wrote the song. Like, that's the thing that, especially when you're starting out, it's hard to even imagine that you could ever do that.
It is,
but it
actually.
is true. If you stick at it, it actually you get quicker. It gets better. It gets easier. You become more confident.
Yeah, definitely. I always think that it is this balance of really. Once again, I'll keep coming back to it because I think it is the most important thing as a songwriter, as an artist, whatever it is. It's the inner work and the inner journey that is going to provide the clarity that is required for that information to come through you. And then you have these skills that are set up around you to support that even more. In terms of hours, I have literally no idea. It's because it's like my whole life. Like it's every second of the day, there's something spinning there that is contributing to the development of that artistry in some capacity. and it's just, you live it, don't you? I guess everyone here would understand that. Like it is you. That's what you're here for, you know?
I'm going to open up for questions in a sec after this one. So if anyone's got anything, just get ready to put your hands in the air as if you really do care.
Hope so.
It's a good joke, that one.
Are you a dad?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, if the shoe fits.
Yeah.
George, I wanted to ask, like, you know, music is constantly recycling itself, consciously or unconsciously. So
true.
how often do you write a melody or write a piece of music and then listen back to it and go, oh, I think I might have actually, that sounds like that bit from that Fleetwood Mac song. Or, because it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
You know, how conscious are you of that? How often does it happen? And what do you do in those situations? Like, have you ever had that happen, you know? Or have you kind of avoided that, actually?
I don't know. I always think, I have a lot of like younger artists ask me this as well, because they get stressed out about copyright infringement and what have you, which is totally fair. I am always of the opinion that just create and write, and then you'll have, there are ways to figure out if you have accidentally done that, whether it's through a manager, whether it's through someone listening to it and going, actually that's this hook from this, and then you address that once it's there. You can either rework it, or like for example with the song Hero that I wrote, the In Your Arms tag is from Waiting for a Star to Fall. But it's an interpolation of Waiting for a Star to Fall.
I've been trying to figure that out.
Have
actually.
you?
Yeah. For
There you go.
the last week or so, I've been like, I think there's something
Yeah.
in there. Interesting. Yeah, of course.
So when I wrote that in my little apartment in LA, it was like ages ago, and I just had my keyboard with me, and I remember I knew what it was, but I actually knew it from the Milo song. Do you remember the Milo song?
No.
There was a Milo in my arms, and it was a mashup.
Oh shit! I thought you meant the chocolate powder.
No.
Dad's here again. Sorry.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, like
No,
Milo that
Milo.
you drink. Yeah, no,
M-Y-L-O.
Milo. Yeah, drop the pressure.
Yeah. So we had this song that was In My Arms or In Your Arms, I can't
Okay.
remember. And it was a mashup of Betty Davis Eyes and Waiting for a Star to Fall.
Yeah.
And so I knew it from that, but I knew it was obviously not from that. But I tagged it and I just made a mental note. I was like, I'm going to have to do something about that. I don't think I'm going to be able to just like release this. And I was working with Virgin in the UK at the time. And so what did we do? We had to contact the publishers. And it turns out that they're also the writers of I Want to Dance with Somebody, which is a fun fact. Waiting for a Star, Boy Meets Girl is
Right.
I Want to Dance with Somebody. And it would have been really weird because I'd been singing I Want to Dance with Somebody into Hero before we'd actually like properly cleared the song. I'm just doing it live. So I thought that was very, very strange. So that's considered an interpolation because I actually changed the melody slightly. So I had to get their permission. I think I changed the lyrics as well, but I had to get the permission before I actually did it. And they have a cut on the song. So you can always figure it out. You're better to just write and whatever inspires you, and then figure that out second.
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost like I'd tweak that a little bit to say like you can always figure it out. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you would have been in a situation you've got, you know, you're working with Virgin, you've got
True.
lawyers, you can reach out to the original writers of that song, cut them in. You know, if you're working just in your bedroom
Yeah.
and you write a song and you're like, you know what's going to make this song amazing is if I just sing a bit of this Rihanna track in the middle of it. You know, like that's kind of hard.
hit.
You're like, and I'll just email like hello@rihanna.com. Hey man, like they'll literally never respond.
You
to
can find our publishers though. I do think
Yeah,
publishers
but-
would respond.
Well, no, they don't.
They don't? Oh, okay.
I think. Well, I mean, look, I might be talking out of turn, but from my experience, I think like if you aren't sort of already working at a level
Sure.
or enmeshed in again that capital I industry thing, it can be really hard to even get the attention of those kind of publishers and stuff. Even if you've
Gotcha.
got the best idea and you've written the best song, it can still be really, really hard, especially these days, unless it's trending already or gone viral in some way. So that can be kind of tricky. But I would also add to that, I'm definitely not saying, hey, go out there and rip off Rihanna, but I am saying like, what's the phrase? Like, ask permission later.
Oh, really?
No, don't ask permission.
Be free.
Don't ask permission, but ask for forgiveness later. Like,
Oh god.
yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I feel like that.
Your lawyer probably wouldn't say that, but
I think so. I don't know.
it's that kind of thing. Music is, it's almost, have the people from APRA left? Because I'm about to say something controversial. Music evolves constantly, and it's always biting. Every song is biting every other song constantly.
There's more
Often
and more
unconsciously,
lawsuits. Yeah.
often subconsciously. So, you know, if you get too stuck on going back through the song you've just written with a fine-tooth comb going, oh my God, is this interval, does that match any interval from any Beatles song ever in history?
Yeah.
Like, you're just not going to get anything done. You kind of just have to go for it and get out there. And the worst thing that's going to happen is that someone from some legal department's going to reach out and scare you into pulling the song off Spotify, and then you just go and write another song. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why I went on my little rant just then, but I promised I would open this up to questions, because I think we've got about 15 minutes. So it's okay if no one's got questions, but I feel like someone will.
Yay.
Let's start on the left over here. What have we got?
So you mentioned like moving out of Australia for your career.
Yeah.
Do you think that like helped your career, or do you think it's like you could have a successful music career staying in Australia?
I think it really depends what you want. So I think for me, like, mine once again was a bit random. When I wrote the song for Flight Facilities, I don't know, I'd written another song for someone else, I can't remember, and a manager contacted me from the UK. And I'm a bit of like a gypsy, so I was like, yeah, I'll move to the UK. Okay, let's go. And I literally got on a plane like the next month, and then it all kind of snowballed from there because BBC was over there and there was like just stuff. So it was a really good place. But then what happened is that got me the attention that I needed to come back and then sign deals here and then re-sign another deal in the UK. Like, that was kind of how the industry was working back then as well. It was before Spotify and before, I think Spotify was very small, but it was like very early days. But I really think it just comes down to your needs specifically as a songwriter or as an artist. Like, if you just figure out what you want and then make a plan around that. To be honest, like, a lot of the work for me, LA is about living. It's actually not about work. I work wherever, it doesn't really matter, but for me, that's my soul home. That's what I love being there. I have like a 4-block radius that I go, and that's about it. And it's just very simple kind of life. It's not really about progressing in my career. And I was talking to my friend who's quite a big songwriter over there, and she goes, you know, LA really it really chews you up and spits you out. And I was like, oh, I don't think that. I love it. It's just because it's so chill. But the work itself for me is very much like I can do it on a plane going to Amsterdam if I need to. So I think I figured that out quite early on. So where I was, not really that important, but there are hubs. You know, if you do want to be a big songwriter, LA is probably the place to be. If you want to tour festivals in Australia, then Australia could be a really good place. We've got such an amazing, post-COVID, we have an incredible festival circuit here. If you want to, you know, get played on Triple J, and then also those things lead you overseas naturally sometimes as well. Look at Tash Sultana, look at like so many artists who have had such incredible careers overseas. The Rufus Boys, like winning Grammys and what have you. So I think every path is different. It's just what works for you personally, creatively, and that can change as well as you evolve. But yeah, the overseas thing, maybe, but maybe not. I just think it's all about like Also, it's all about your songs at the end of the day and what you're bringing to the table as an artist and where that fits and allowing it to kind of flow wherever it needs to be. I think, does that help? Yeah. Okay, good.
I'll also throw in like there is that kind of like really visible kind of top part of music, which is in Australia, which is like Triple J, Hottest 100, Splendor in the Grass, yada yada. There are a lot of music writers and artists trying to work in that space, but there are also a lot of like professional musicians and writers who don't work in that really visible space, who maybe are based in Australia, even though a lot of their work is overseas. I often think about metal.
Yeah, metal's huge.
But yeah, specifically, I often think about I assume it's still the case, but maybe 5-10 years ago, I remember just learning that there were these metal bands that were massive in Europe, like massive in Germany, Finland and whatever, and they lived in like Bandura, you know, or they lived in Warragul for all I know. Do you know what I mean? Like, and they would make their records here, they would have their creative relationships here, they'd have maybe even a lot of their team here, but then they'd go and they'd tour around Germany for 2 or 3 months, sold out shows, make a ton of cash, have labels and publishers and stuff over there. Now, you're not going to hear those stories necessarily on Triple J. That band's never going to play Splendor in the Grass. But, you know, there are all these different pathways, and you don't necessarily have to be overseas in order to be working overseas.
Yeah.
But as George said, if you are, for example, your aspiration is, I want to be a pop songwriter, packing up and going to LA might not be the worst idea, even just from a life experience angle.
Yeah.
Nice place to live. You might bump into some people, but it's a hard grind starting in a new
Yeah.
city from scratch. You know, no support.
But it's amazing. Once if you're able to get into that little nook, it's a beautiful space.
Go and knock on George's door when you get
Yeah,
there.
I'm always here. You always like DM me or whatever.
Well, there is a great, I mean, LA and also in any city in the world, you'll find a network of expats, of Australian expats.
This is true.
And
Yeah.
shout out APRA, there's APRA
Yeah.
reps in different cities and in different places. There's a great guy in London that you can go and grab a beer with if you're over there called Adam. And he'll basically, if you're an Australian APRA member, you can basically get in touch with Adam. He'll take you out for a beer and be like, yeah, you should go meet this person. So, you know, you've got to, like, there are people you can reach out to and networks you can start to put yourself in, but sometimes you do need to be on the ground, even if it's just for a couple of weeks, going over and like, I'm going to go and have some meetings and stuff, but it's still expensive, still hard. Okay, more questions? That was a great question. We'll go this side. I'm going to bounce back and forth like this. Let's go this way.
I relate to a lot of what you were saying about like free form writing, and it just was happening naturally a lot. So, which, I mean, I often see that as a blessing, but sometimes it can be a curse when you like can't stop and you can't shut your brain off, and you're like in the middle of something you can be paying attention to, and your brain is like, let's write a song. So do you have like any tips or ideas on how to like refocus and not get like all consumed with it if you don't have that structure?
Yeah, I think grounding exercises are good. But I also I think that when you get into one of those spaces, like I personally think you have to follow it to the ends of the earth. We were just talking about this before about like, I imagine for someone like me, like having children would be quite difficult because I'd be like, oh my God, I forgot about you, I'm so sorry. Like, because because you, like, I personally believe in like, it's like emotional processing or whatever you need to follow it until it's done. And then you're like, okay, now I'm tired, I need to lie on the floor. But there are grounding, I guess if it's something that's important to you, it's building structure, looking into grounding exercises, even things like breathing techniques to bring your nervous system down. I think the nervous system has a lot to do with that, that kind of like hyper focus or whatever it is that keeps you on that upstream for quite a while. And just listening to your body as well and figuring out what actually does work for you. And I often have conversations with my inner world. I have my little characters that sit there at the round table and I'm like, how are we doing? What do you need? And you'll find that there are these different characters that come through in different times. So you've got your creative fairy that's going, and then you're like, okay, we kind of need like the dad to come in and go, we just need to chill for a second. So developing whatever works for you. I mean, characters work for me because it's just the way my brain works, but everyone has a different way of finding that come down, I guess, and managing that come down well. Does that help? Yeah? Cool?
That's awesome, yeah. It's that balance between following your passion, which is why we're doing it, and and getting that emotion out, but finding the tools that keep you safe, you know, and keep you in it for the long term. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Any more questions? So maybe this guy actually, you've been waiting a bit.
Are there any experiences in your life or the way you're brought up that is sort of reflected on how you write songs and how you look at making songs and, you know, like experiences in your life? And,
yeah, I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think that growing up in an environment where, and I didn't realize this until a lot later on, that I wasn't really seen properly. I felt quite out of place. And I think that's a perfect recipe for artistry because you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to go write a song. Because, you know, I had this friend at high school that said like, oh, is that what you do on the weekends? You go home and you write songs? And I thought, maybe I do. You know, like it was this kind of like isolation, I think, that I experienced. A loneliness, I guess, which I think is a lot of artists experience the same thing. And I think that kind of comes through if I look retrospectively into my work. There was this kind of like pain that was there about not being fully seen and not being fully like understood because I probably didn't understand myself either. So I think it's ironically like the lack of understanding that leads you to chase that understanding, and a part of that journey is creating things that help you to understand yourself a little bit more, if that makes sense. So yeah, just being a little bit out of place was probably the essence of why I created, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
you have a question?
Sure, thank you. You talked a lot about the inner work you've
Mhm.
done, and I'm all about that as well. So I was wondering if you have a special breakthrough you've gone through that you could share with us.
Sure. Do you mean like techniques or a life experience or?
Yeah, within your journey, like a life experience, like an aha moment type of thing, where you realize something that you thought, oh, how did I not think about this earlier?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had one the other day. I had one 2 days ago where I had like an interesting experience happen to me, and I realized that this has been happening quite a lot over my life. And I had a sense of betrayal within me, right? And I was working through that emotion. And then I watched something, and I'm writing a film at the moment, so I'm moving into film kind of space. And I was thinking about that, and I just had this like epiphany. I was like, oh, you know what? I think this is what I signed up for. And I think that it was watching this thing about viewing everything from the lens of the artist and really looking at the world in all its ugliness as beautiful. And I thought about it because it was like a really painful experience that I was going through. And I was like, why? Why do I have to be like the vessel for all of this stuff? And I don't know, something shifted, and I went, I think this is the point. You know, you're meant to experience these things in a very intense way. You're meant to, we call it contrast, like you experience a lot of contrast, a lot of like big, intense experiences and emotions that come from those experiences and life events and what have you. And I know something shifted within me where I went, okay, so I think I'm going to start coming at it from a place of like, this is so beautiful. How beautiful that I've been given an opportunity to experience things so deeply and to feel things on this massive spectrum, and then also to have an outlet to actually put this stuff into a place. That was a really big epiphany moment. And I think also what we were talking about before, the inner world, really understanding my inner, I don't know if you've ever done parts work or there's a thing called parts work. Everyone should do parts work in my opinion, because the idea is that we enter into the world as a whole. We come in as this like little glowing orb, and then people tell us what we can and what we can't be. And parts of ourselves go, oh, I should be quiet. And this part goes, I should be loud. And eventually what happens is we kind of fracture off, and we're sort of fragmented. And I think a big part of my journey, particularly over the last year or so, has been identifying which parts have been silent and which parts, and it's funny because your music will tell you which parts are silent because they're yelling to be heard, and bringing those parts of yourself back into alignment with each other to eventually, hopefully, become that glowing orb that you were to begin with. That's a really incredible place, just from a personal experience point of view, like experiencing life with joy. But I think having an understanding of your different characters and your different personalities that exist within you is very powerful creatively, and very powerful in terms of how you approach situations and how you talk to yourself and how you interact with others. And just the more vocabulary that you can actually develop within yourself, the better you're going to be long term, I think.
That's awesome.
Does that help?
Thanks for sharing.
You're so welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for asking such a great question.
We might have time just for a couple more questions if anybody has one. We'll go over here, and then yeah.
Whoop, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because I thought you were going to touch on it before, but I think you mentioned that your team is maybe just you.
Oh, yes.
You might elaborate on why just you.
I want to know about this
how
too.
that works out, yeah.
Sure. Well, I've had many teams over the years. I have had different managerial structures. I've got actually that's not true. I don't completely not have a team. I have publishers, I have lawyers, I have accountants. Actually, we were talking about this the other day. So I think what I figured out for me personally, it's an individual preference. For me, I like to have autonomy, I like to have sovereignty, I like to do things the way that I like to do them. That's always been the way, and that has worked never with a managerial structure, ever. It just doesn't work for me. So I realized I'm basically unmanageable. You ask any ex-manager, it's true. But it was like really owning that and being like, nah, it doesn't work for me. So in order for me to be able to run a creative infrastructure, the way that I work is actually projects. So I have a production company that facilitates a lot of we're making a film at the moment, and there's things like that. But the project will be specifically tailored to whatever needs to happen. So if I need to go into an album cycle, or if I decide that I want to make an album, I build a team around the album specifically. From a financial point of view, that works really well for me as well, because then I don't have anyone that's on like a wage or taking 10% or what have you, or 20%. That just works really well for me. I figured that out like probably about 5 years ago. I was like, okay, this is just what I'm going to do and how I'm going to run the business side of things, which I do not like, by the way. That side is not fun. But then there's certain people that you can't forego, in my opinion. I think you need great accountants from like an early stage, and that understanding of how money works. That's something I did not have, and I now finally have really great accountants that give me amazing advice, and we have pretty good infrastructure that's developing. Really great lawyers are essential, because obviously you can't just become a lawyer overnight. So you need lawyers to be able to look over things. But it's really just like understanding what you need based on your individual journey. And I think like if I did another really hectic album cycle or something, I would look into employing a manager for 12 months, but it would be like a contract basis. And it would be very much like, you're my manager that's working for me for 12 months. You get paid on a monthly basis, because that's what works for me. But it's not for everyone. I know some artists that have incredible manager relationships, and I think that is if you're able to find someone that you can have that relationship with, amazing. That's awesome. It just wasn't my journey specifically, hence why the team is just me. But I'm cool with that now. I don't even think about it actually, because it's just, I think of it as just like, we've got jobs to do, and then we figure out a way to do it, basically. Does that answer that?
There are also many full-time musicians working professionally, doing amazing things, touring the world, signed to big labels, millions of streams, yada, yada, yada. There's many of those that don't have management, which is a really important thing, I think, that we don't talk about a lot, because there are a lot of artists that do have managers and have big teams around them, but there are pathways of self-management that are actually... it sounds potentially, from what you're saying, George, if that's the direction you're going to go in now. I doubt very much that you're unmanageable. It just might be that
You'd be surprised.
It just may simply be that you've arrived at a point where you've realised, actually, the best thing for me, I've got the skills now, I've got the tools, I've got the vision, and I can find some budget.
Yeah.
The best thing for me is actually, I'm just going to guide this. Like, I've got the relationships I need to be my own manager. Which, to be realistic and be like frank about it, 99% of all artists or writers or whatever in their lives are going to be self-managed for maybe all of it or most of it. So.
And you should definitely have you should have a vocabulary and a comprehension of what your manager's actually doing. Even if you do have a manager, so important to know what the things are, particularly money, particularly accounting, general understanding of rights. As much as you can educate yourself.
Learn their job before they do it.
Basically, that's...
If you are in a position, if you get to a position where you can have a manager, it's good to know what they're going to be doing, because you've been doing it.
But then also, once you do know, I think I always talk to my younger artists who are looking at getting management. I always make sure that there's a very symbiotic kind of relationship. Well, not even symbiotic. It's more, once again, putting yourself in their shoes, like understanding what they actually, because a lot of artists don't think their managers do very much. That's the consistent thread that I've had, but that's not true. They're working, a lot of them are just working really, really hard, but they're not necessarily getting anywhere, particularly because it's like early in the career, and so they're investing hours and hours and hours and hours into something, and the artist might not see that because they're not seeing necessarily results in certain spaces. But I think when you do commit to a manager, it's like having a partnership or like a marriage. You trust them. You choose someone who you actually can trust, and they have to earn your trust. Then you let them do their job, and you revel in the fact that you don't, like, it's like when I have a producer on a job, it's amazing. I don't have to worry about things. I just get to direct, or I get to film producer. It changes the way that I work and actually frees me up to be a lot more creative. So when you appreciate it from that space, rather than going, what's my manager doing? How are they making me money? What am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like finding the right partner. Choose someone who you actually do trust, and then go with it. I think that's really important.
Could talk on this topic for hours, but there's a guy in the UK, an electronic producer called Fred Again, who
him.
Works a lot with like Stormzy and Ed Sheeran, but he's also
amazing.
Puts out a lot of his own music as well. And I recently learned that his brother is his manager, and has always been his manager since they were like teenagers. And his brother knew nothing about the music industry, but was driven by a passion and a desire for to see his brother succeed and a belief in his brother's talent. Do you know what I mean? And so Fred has talked about this in a couple of interviews where it's like it's a different relationship to what a lot of artists have with their managers, because he knows that no matter what is on the table, no matter what money is flying around, what promises are flying around, he knows that his brother's got his best interests at heart because it's his brother. So
it's so important.
It's interesting, like some of the healthiest artist-manager relationships that are out there are often family or close friends, even though that can make it really complicated. Doing business with your family and your friends can get really complicated, but that kind of trust, without that trust, makes it pretty hard to have someone who's so closely working with you, you know, to have that trust is really important. Anyway, that's a whole other combo. Right, one last quick question from the front, and then we stick around and come and, I don't know how this works. We'll be around if anyone wants to come and ask us questions, but one more question.
You mentioned earlier to figure out what you want in your career.
Yes.
Do you have any advice on how to do that? Because
Sure.
coming from, say, a career change or someone who's emerging and doesn't know much about the music industry,
Yeah.
how do you actually know what you want without actually knowing what it is? Or is it kind of like you guess and then you try things out? Or?
Definitely. It's all about definitely trying things out. And I also think that one technique that is quite helpful, it's figuring out what you don't want, what you really don't like, and then looking at what the opposite of that is. I find that's a really useful technique. And also, I think a lot of it can be less tangible and more, I call them like pillars. So it's just your values, basically. So it's like, what do you really value? So I really value expression and freedom. Freedom's really important to me, like that wildness and that freedom is really important to me. So that becomes a fundamental value. And if I go in a direction that is in contradiction to that, it's not going to feel good to me. And so understanding those fundamental values within yourself and then experimenting and seeing what aligns and what collides. And then you kind of like, you'll sift through and eventually I feel like you'll find that the place that you really love, and it might be somewhere completely unexpected because you're not looking externally. Once again, you're coming from within and like what is in alignment with you as a human being to begin with, regardless of what genre or what style or even what vocation you might be pursuing. Does that make sense? Yeah. But what I don't like really helps. It's like, I don't like being restricted. Oh, that means I like freedom. Cool. All right. So that's a good start, you know? That list is helpful. Should we do the one last one? I saw that
Can we? I'm getting the thumbs up.
Okay.
We can do one.
I saw that you still have one.
One more question.
I was wondering, like during lockdown, live music depreciated badly.
Yes.
How did you maintain your mental health well-being, and what made you driven and determined as a performer?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. Thank you. I actually got on a plane on I think it was like the 13th of March, 2020, from LA. I called my mum. Everything got really weird in LA. And I called mum, she's an epidemiologist, and I was like, what is this thing, this epidemic? I think it was an epidemic at that stage. And should I be worried? Should I get on a plane? She goes, I think you should just get on a plane, come home for a couple of weeks. And that was a week before hotel quarantine. And then I had to pack up my house from Australia. I had to put everything to storage. I had to I was on a lease. So I had to not break the lease, but my landlords were really nice. And then about 3 months in, like most people, I hit this point where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And kind of freaked out. It was around my birthday as well. I think birthdays are always they bring all that stuff up. And then the next day, I decided that I would write a film. And so that's how that kind of got me through. I made this like live performance film in the middle of lockdown, and then ended up premiering it at the Opera House at the end of the year, just in between the however many lockdowns we had, when we thought everything was safe again. But honestly, the thing that helped my mental health was I just tried to just keep on working and channeling all of the stuff that I was experiencing into a project. For me, projects really work because there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end, and there's a sense of accomplishment. And then lots of exercise helped as well. But it was hard. It was really difficult, like for everyone. Everyone had different experience, and it was worse down here. yeah, I think just creating is the thing that always gets me through anything, basically. It's the thing that saves me. Does that help? Okay.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your time and for listening to us and for your amazing questions as well. That was really great.
So good, thank you.
I want to thank APRA AMCOS again for welcoming us here to Gunai Kurnai country and letting us talk about some of our experiences. But most of all, let's give it up a round of applause for George Maple.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Tim. I'm clapping for you. Can we please give a round of applause for Tim?
Cool. Enjoy the rest of your days. It's going to be a really inspiring day, I think, for everyone.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
We do have a break now, but let's take 10 minutes. Bathrooms, and guys, there's food at the back. It's for you. It's not just for us.